So imagine for a second that you're driving on a highway. You're doing the speed limit, just cruising along, feeling pretty good.
Right, just a normal commute.
Yeah, exactly. And then suddenly a car in the lane next to you zooms past. I mean, just completely flies by.
Yeah.
Now, be honest with me. What is the immediate physical sensation in your body when that happens? Do you feel, I don't know, annoyed? Do you feel a little anxious that maybe you're going too slow? Or does your foot instinctively just press down closer to the floorboard?
It's a totally primal reaction, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for most people, that moment of comparison, seeing someone pull ahead of you, brings this sort of spike of stress, maybe even a flash of resentment.
Exactly. But what if your brain wasn't wired to feel resentment at all? What if seeing that car pass you didn't make you feel bad, but instead acted like someone just injected high-octane rocket fuel directly into your engine?
That's a wild thought.
Right. What if the gap between you and them wasn't some kind of personal judgment, but just data?
And that is exactly the shift we're exploring today. We're unpacking a personality profile that doesn't just tolerate competition, they metabolize it. They literally eat it for breakfast.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have a really fascinating mission. We're digging into a specific profile from the Max Energy ME80 personality system.
Yes, to the ME80.
And the profile is called the WASU, or the Competitive Improver. And I really want to set the stage for you listening right now. This isn't just about being competitive in the sense that you really want to win a game of Monopoly.
No, what at all.
This is a fundamental operating system where the entire world is processed through this lens of continuous improvement.
It's a really great distinction to make early on. We often think of competitive people as aggressive or loud or boastful.
Yeah, like the person yelling at the referee.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
But the WA is different. This profile is really about the internal mechanics of self-evolution.
So before we get into the gears of this evolution engine, let's orient ourselves a bit. We're working with the Max Energy ME80 system today.
We are.
For listeners who might be familiar with other standard personality tests but are new to this one, how exactly is the ME80 different?
Well, think of it this way. Most standard personality tests describe your software. Are you friendly? Are you organized? Are you an extrovert?
Right, the surface level behavioral stuff.
Exactly. But the Max Energy ME80 system looks at the hardware. It looks at your underlying energy mechanics. How does your internal battery actually charge? Where does the energy flow when you're put under extreme pressure?
Wow, okay. So how do you process information before you even realize you're thinking about it?
Precisely. It's the schematic of the machine itself, not just the paint job.
I love that. And today's machine, the WASU, seems built for a very specific purpose. Let's look at their identity and their core declaration. The source material gives them this hero slogan that honestly sounds like something you'd read on a giant billboard.
It really does. The core declaration is, turns comparison into fuel, converting long races into steady advantage.
Converting long races into steady advantage. That implies this definitely isn't a sprint for them.
No, it's a marathon. The WASU is defined fundamentally as a striving personality. Their baseline state of being is this constant recalibration of their position in the world.
Okay, so imagine a GPS. But it doesn't just tell you where you are, it creates this real-time glowing line showing you exactly how far behind the leader you are.
That's a perfect analogy.
See, to me, though, that sounds incredibly stressful. If my GPS did that, I'd probably just pull over and turn it off. I'd want to just look at the scenery. But the report says they are extremely sensitive to gaps.
They are very sensitive to it. But here is the critical pivot point, and if you get this, you really get the WSU.
Okay.
Seeing that gap, seeing that they are number 2 and not number 1, it doesn't trigger despair.
It doesn't.
No, it activates their inner engine. The document literally says once they sense they are falling behind, their inner engine activates, driving them to chase and correct.
So the anxiety of falling behind actually is the starter motor.
Exactly. They don't fear acknowledging their shortcomings. In fact, they actively hunt for them. If they can't find a gap between themselves and a competitor, they might actually feel stagnant and restless.
Wow, they need the gap to know which direction to run.
Yes.
That leads us directly to their control mechanism. How do they actually handle this global view, this constant comparison? The text mentions they convert reluctance into executable improvement plans.
Executable improvement plans.
I literally underlined that phrase 3 times in my notes.
It's basically their love language. It is the core difference between wallowing in failure and strategizing for success. Their whole control philosophy is that power is accumulated through repeated comparison and retrospective analysis.
So they look back to move forward.
Right. The report describes this process as a stable evolutionary force.
A stable evolutionary force. That's a big phrase.
It is big, because they aren't trying to win the lap just to show off to the crowd. They're trying to evolve their actual running form so that by mile 20, they are physically a more efficient machine than they were at mile 1. They view their entire life as a series of system upgrades.
Okay, let's pop the hood then. This is where the ME80 system gets really interesting with the energy matrix.
Yes, the 3 layers.
Right. We have IP, IQ, and EQ. And I know for most of us, those acronyms usually mean intellectual property or emotional intelligence. But in this specific system, they mean something very different about energy flow, right?
Very different. In the ME80 context, you can think of these as 3 sequential filters that external energy passes through.
Okay, walk me through them.
First is IP, which stands for the inner value layer. This is your raw gut instinct, your deepest foundational wiring.
Got it.
Then the energy moves to IQ, the emotional activation layer. This is what actually revs your engine, what sparks your passion.
And then finally.
Finally, it hits EQ, the decision calculation layer. This is how you handle the load and actually execute your response.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's trace a piece of real-world information through a WASU's brain using this matrix. Let's say a competitor launches a new product that is just slightly better than theirs. What happens in that first IP layer?
So in the inner value layer, the WASU trait is risk perception activation, which is fascinating. Their gut instinct basically acts like a long-range radar for failure.
A radar for failure.
Yeah, long before the sales numbers even drop, the WASU senses the vulnerability. They see the tiny crack in the damn way before it ever starts leaking.
Man, that sounds like a superpower, but also kind of heavy. You're always the person in the room saying, hey guys, this could go wrong.
It is a heavy burden to carry. But for them, remember, it's just data. They perceive the risk, and instead of freezing up in panic, the energy moves cleanly up to the next level.
To the IQ layer, the emotional activation.
Right, and the trait here for the WASU is structure and principle judgment.
Structure and principle judgment, that is a very weird way to describe emotion. I mean, usually we think of emotion as messy, right? Like crying or yelling or jumping up and down for joy.
Not for the WSU. Their passion is order.
Really?
Yeah. Their emotional response to that perceived risk is to immediately build a framework. They get genuinely excited, activated by creating a structured solution.
So they don't get emotional about the problem itself.
Exactly. They get emotional about the fix. They channel all that potential stress immediately into building a new spreadsheet, a new plan, a new protocol.
Okay, so step 1, my gut sees a threat in the IP layer. Step 2, my emotions drive me to build a structure to fix it in the IQ layer.
You've got it.
Now we hit step 3, the EQ layer, the decision layer. And this one seems to be the secret sauce that keeps them from just total burning out. The report calls it emotional carrying capacity and stability.
This is exactly why they win long races.
Yeah.
Because think about it. If you spend your entire life looking for risks and constantly building new structures to fix them, you should be completely exhausted.
Oh, I'd be ready for a nap by noon.
Right. But the WASU has a massive carrying capacity. They can bear the heavy weight of that constant gap analysis without collapsing. They're incredibly stable.
So they are basically the pack mules of the corporate world.
In the most respectful way possible, yes. They are the marathon runners. They maintain stable, high-level output even when the pressure in the room is crushing everyone else.
It's that self-iteration trait the report mentioned.
Exactly. They take external pressure and they convert it into internal propulsion.
They eat pressure.
They literally eat pressure.
I love that image so much. But I do want to talk about how this looks to the outside world. Because if you have all this internal churning, risk detection, structural planning, pressure processing, you would expect them to be running around the office, screaming or looking frantic.
You would think so.
But the manifestation layer in the report says their energy actually operates inward.
Yes. This is a very vital distinction for this profile, because some high-energy types explode outward.
Like the charismatic sales leader who's high-fiving everyone and ringing a giant gong in the bullpen.
Exactly. But the WASU is entirely different. They are more like a high-density battery. They are constantly carrying, absorbing, and integrating the energy around them.
So they might actually seem kind of quiet to the rest of us.
Calm, but intense. I always think of a server room in a massive data center.
Oh, that's a good visual.
Right. You walk in, it's quiet, the air is cool, and there's just this steady hum. But inside those server racks, there is a massive amount of processing power happening. It's generating heat and calculating millions of data points a second.
That is so accurate. A WASU pulls data in from the outside world to power that massive internal engine.
Which perfectly explains why the report mentions they can sometimes be a little hard to read socially. You don't see the messy struggle on their face, you just see the polished result.
Because they're processing the upgrade in the background.
Exactly.
Let's dig a little deeper into their inner characteristics. There is a concept here called gap perception analysis. We've touched on this a bit, but the source material has this great quote. It says they do not view comparison as negative stress, but rather as data-driven coordinates.
Coordinates.
I just love that idea.
It completely reframes how you look at the world, doesn't it? Think about navigation for a second. If you're sailing a ship in the middle of the dark ocean, you look for a lighthouse, or maybe a star.
Right.
You don't look at the lighthouse and get mad at it for being where it is.
Yeah, you don't say, oh man, I'm so jealous of that lighthouse. It's so bright and tall.
Exactly. It's just a reference point. A WASU treats a successful colleague or a rival company exactly like a lighthouse. It just tells them where they are relative to the concept excellent.
And then they use that data to steer their own ship.
Yes. They precisely adjust their progress pace. And the result of that, as the source notes, is this visible uplifting of standards over the course of a long race.
Because they don't just get better individually.
No, they inadvertently raise the bar for the entire environment because they're constantly proving out loud that better is actually possible.
And you knew there was a but coming here.
There is always a but.
No engine runs forever without maintenance. Living your entire life in what the report calls semi-combat status has to have a downside. Let's talk about their shadow blind spot.
The shadow for the WSU is called self-consumption.
Self-consumption. That sounds incredibly ominous, like an Ouroboros just eating its own tail.
It is a very real, very dangerous trap for this profile because they're always in that semi-combat mode. They're always racing, always analyzing, always fixing. They really struggle to fully relax. The engine never truly turns off.
So what triggers the negative spiral then? Is it when they lose?
Surprisingly, no. Losing just gives them more data. Losing motivates them.
Oh, interesting.
The real trigger is stagnation.
Stagnation.
Yes. It happens when their progress speed falls short of their own high expectations. If they are trying desperately to close a gap and they just can't, or if they feel they aren't improving fast enough, all that intense intrinsic drive turns inward on them.
So instead of fueling the engine, the fuel just starts bringing the chassis down.
Exactly. They start eating themselves up with severe self-doubt. Because their energy flows inward, remember that manifestation layer we talked about?
Right, the quiet server room?
Yes. Because of that, they fall into the trap of solo perseverance.
Solo perseverance, meaning they just refuse to ask for help.
They are completely unaccustomed to seeking outside help. Their brain tells them, I just need to process harder. I just need to structure this better. So they try to push through the brick wall entirely alone.
Which has to be exhausting.
It leads to what the system calls hidden emotional depletion. On the outside, they look totally fine again. That stable EQ layer is masking it. But inside, the battery is draining to absolute zero.
That is such a critical watch out. If you are listening to this right now and you manage a WASU, or maybe you're married to one, you have to realize they are not going to tell you when they're drowning.
No, they will just keep swimming until they sink.
You really have to look for the silence then. Like if they stop talking about their next goal or if they seem unusually withdrawn, they might be stuck in that state of self-consumption.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
You have to monitor the absence of their normal drive.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at how they interact with the rest of us mere mortals. Let's look at their social relationships. The style is described in the report as performance-oriented.
Yeah. So if you go out to dinner with a WASU, do not be surprised if the conversation naturally pivots to work targets, self-improvement hacks, or daily metrics.
Wow.
They connect with people by discussing how to get better.
I can see how that would be quite intense for a Friday night. Like, hey, pass the salt. And by the way, have you optimized your morning hydration routine yet?
It can definitely be intense, but on the positive side, they earn a massive amount of admiration from their peers. People look at them and say, wow, look at that drive. Look at how disciplined they are.
They inspire the people around them.
They really do.
Yeah.
But there is a negative social trade-off, and that is potential social isolation.
Because they can be a little exhausting to be around constantly.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they are continuously raising the standards. If you just want to relax, have a beer, and just be beautifully average for one night, sitting next to a WASU can feel like sitting next to a walking pressure cooker.
They make you feel like you should be doing more just by existing in the same room as you.
Exactly. They place pressure on their colleagues, often totally unintentionally. It's just their baseline aura. So if you're friends with a WASU, sometimes you have to actively remind them that it is okay to just sit on the couch and not optimize the popcorn making process.
They need explicit permission to power down.
They do.
All right, let's talk about money and career. If I am a CEO and I've got a WASU on my payroll, where do I put them to get the absolute maximum business value?
You put them in the engine room of a stalled ship. The report calls them the organization's evolution engine.
Why specifically a stalled ship, though?
Because they absolutely excel at finding efficiency gains within existing frameworks. They don't necessarily need to be the visionary artist inventing a brand new product from thin air.
I see.
But if you give them a product or a process that is pretty good, they will obsess night and day over making it perfect.
They'll find the leaks.
They will take a standard production line and find that 20% efficiency gap that literally no one else saw. They're ruthless optimizers.
So they ensure the company maintains that upward momentum through repeated iteration.
Yes, they have this intuitive grasp of performance metrics.
So based on all of that, what are the recommended professional fields for a competitive improver?
Well, goal-oriented roles are right at the top of the list. Think sales management, performance growth, major account development.
Basically anywhere where there is a very clear scoreboard.
Exactly, because they need that data. They need those coordinates to steer by.
Yeah.
If the goals are vague like, your job is to improve team morale, a WASU might really struggle with that.
Because how do you measure morale?
Right. But if the goal is increase employee retention by 14% in Q3, they know exactly what to do. The list also strongly recommends operations optimization. So things like growth stage management, process redesign, efficiency expertise.
That tracks perfectly with what we just discussed. And interestingly, the report also highlights professional skills training and coaching.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about it.
Huh.
If you have spent your entire life intensely analyzing exactly how to get better at things, you can probably teach the mechanics of that improvement to someone else.
They're natural technical coaches. They don't just say try harder, they break down the exact how.
Yes. And finally, the report recommends high-pressure environments. Startups, investment banking, elite sports competition.
Places that would break most people.
Yes. Places where the pressure crushes other personality types, the WASU just converts that pressure right into propulsion.
It's a truly fascinating profile. It's almost like they are specifically designed to thrive where the rest of us just stress out.
As long as they manage that shadow side of self-consumption, they are incredibly powerful assets to any team. They are the ones who basically guarantee that next year is actually going to be better than this year.
All right, so let's wrap this deep dive up. We've looked at the ME80 system, we've looked at this inward flowing energy matrix, the risk perception, and of course, this relentless drive to close the gap. Is there a summary or a gold sentence from the report that ties all of this together?
There is, and it's a really beautiful summary of their highest potential. The report concludes with this exact thought. When effort genuinely translates into capability and progress is clearly documented, the competitive improver continues igniting themselves through successive transcendence, driving the whole forward.
Successive transcendence, that is almost poetic.
It really is.
Yeah.
It captures the fact that it's not just about winning once. It's about constantly becoming a better, more evolved version of yourself.
And I love that last part too, driving the whole forward. When a WASU is healthy and not stuck in their shadow, they don't just improve themselves, they end up pulling the entire team up the mountain with them.
They elevate everyone.
So here is my final thought for you listening right now. If you really resonated with the WASU profile today, if you felt that little spark of recognition when we were talking about seeing the gap, I want to ask you something to mull over.
Good question.
Are you actually running a race against other people, or are you just iterating against your past self? Because those other people, they might eventually drop out of the race, but you will always be running with yourself.
That's powerful. And a practical question to add to that, are you trying to run that long race entirely alone? Because remember, solo perseverance is the trap. You have to let people help you.
Absolutely. And conversely, if you work with a competitive improver, ask yourself this, are you helping them document their progress? Because remember, they need to see the data to know they are winning. If you don't show them the clear scoreboard, they might just burn out thinking they're standing completely still.
Give them the coordinates and just let them sail.
This deep dive into the WASU profile comes from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. It is an incredibly deep system, and we have honestly only scratched the surface of this one single archetype today.
Yeah, there is so much more to it. If you want to understand your own specific energy matrix, figure out your own IP, IQ, and EQ layering, or see exactly where you fit in this system, you should definitely check them out.
You can visit their official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
You can also search for their official pages on Facebook. Just search for Max Energy or Metanergy Personality Psychology. The information there is fantastic.
Because at the end of the day, understanding how your specific energy works is the very first step to actually mastering it. Thanks for diving in with us today. We'll see you on the next one.
Keep improving.
Yeah.